This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
As a chef, I know flavor doesn't begin in the kitchen. It begins on the land. And Westhome's nature-led Australian Wagyu is a story written in the landscape of Northern Australia. Cooking is storytelling, and Westhome Wagyu carries a story of Northern Australia itself. Raw, powerful, and deeply authentic. It's a testament to the passion and care raised in the rhythm of Northern Australia. I'm Chef Maylin from 88 Club in Los Angeles, and I invite you to visit westhome.com/Maylin to learn more. And taste a story only Westhome nature-led Australian Wagyu can tell. That's westhome.com/MEILIN.
Disney Plus wants to know, are you ready? For Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, now streaming on Disney Plus.
Let's do this.
One of the best Marvel movies of all time is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Hey, you weren't listening to me.
I said Thunderbolts, The New Avengers is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Meet the New Avengers.
That's a cool name.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, rated PG-13, now streaming on, you guessed it, Disney Plus.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind a beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and him, Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, who's currently looking quite baffled for some reason. I don't like it when Kieran looks baffled. It can't just be because he wasn't able to give me the count. Are you okay, Kieran, before we carry on here? Well, I need to unbaffle your...
Yes, I was just trying to work out... We're not techno kids, are we, Kevin? Let's be honest.
No.
And I was just looking for a little bit of comfort that we were actually recording as opposed to just babbling. And yeah, there is nothing better than a pre-podcast babble where I get all the dirt about the world of showbiz and you get to hear about all of the wrong-uns in football, which we can't talk about on the pod.
I think we're recording. I've got a little light that says recording and numbers going up, which I presume is the time. This is not the ideal way to start a special pod, Kieran, because this is a special pod. We're recording this on Monday evening. A very, very big news story broke about Chelsea this afternoon. We thought it was too big a story to just add on to the week's news pod because it wouldn't go out till Thursday, and there probably would have been all sorts of ramifications by then. So it's a story that I think people need clarifying on. Essentially, Chelsea have been hit with the largest ever Premier League fine, beating the fine for West Ham some years back by quite some considerable margin. Can you tell us, Kieran, first of all, why they've been hit with such a big fine, when they were first charged and what they were first charged with?
Yes. During the due diligence which was undertaken by Clearlake Capital, who are Chelsea's current owners, when they were buying the club effectively from the UK government, They discovered some transactions which seemed a bit strange, and they effectively said to the government, we're going to withhold £150 million from the agreed price, and at the same time we are going to self-report ourselves, or self-report the football club under the old owners for unauthorised payments, for payments to unlicensed agents, and it looks like some people are being paid off book as well. And they reported themselves to the Premier League, the Football Association, and UEFA. Now, a couple of years ago, July 2023, UEFA gave Chelsea an £8.6 million fine. And 2.5 years later, that's a long time given that it's effectively for the same offence, we have now had a settlement and it's not a charge, it's a sanction agreement between Chelsea Football Club and the Premier League. And that is, as you rightly said, it's the highest ever fine in the history of the Premier League. It's £10 million. And this is a bit strange. It would have been £20 million had Chelsea not dibbed themselves in, had Clearlake Capital not dibbed Chelsea under the Abramovich regime in. So there's that. And there was a separate case involving youth and academy activities where Chelsea have separately been fined £750,000, and I think they've been given a sanction in terms of making it far more difficult for them to recruit young players into the academy. And as well as these fines, Chelsea have been given a suspended sentence for signing players as far as the men's first team is concerned. So it's big numbers. They made payments of £47 million, some of which were to unlicensed agents, some of which were transfer fees. I think the Samuel Eto'o transfer fee, for some reason, was paid via a company in British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands. It wasn't the local branch of the HSBC or Santander, put it like that.
I'll come back to the academy charge later on because it's a separate charge. I have questions, Kieran, as you can imagine. Just in a cursory bit of research this afternoon, I have questions. So this is the same issue that UEFA already charged Chelsea with before and dealt with. Is that right?
Yes. So UEFA have done this. That Chelsea are under a separate set of sanctions from UEFA for a breach of the SCR rules, so that they had a fine, and that was deemed to have dealt with the issues. Now this goes back to the period, I think it was around about 2010 to 2018, but mainly in the period 2014 to 18. And it involved, well, we know as far as the payments to the unlicensed agents were concerned, we know it involved Eden Hazard, Matic, Schürrle, Ramirez and David Luiz. But mysteriously, there are a couple of names which have been redacted. And again, there's a bit of a teaser here because the report has indicated when the players were signed, but not the names of the players. Now, it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to nip on to Transfer Market and to look to see when Chelsea made some signings. So why some players have had their names redacted and others not does seem a bit strange. It could be that those players are still within professional football and therefore they don't want to be brought into it. And it has to be stated, the players have done nothing wrong. This is very much a case of if you use an agent, that agent has to be approved, has to be licensed. When a player signs with an agent, you don't ask to see the players. Don't ask to see the agent's license. If somebody employs me to do some work as an accountant, they don't ask to go and see my exam results from when I did my accounting exam. So you just assume if somebody calls themselves a football agent or a chartered accountant or a chartered surveyor, whatever, you assume that person's got the appropriate qualifications. So the players weren't to know, and why these agents were being paid through these third-party organisations is because they would, if that had been the case, if the football authorities would have spotted, hold on, he's not on the approved list. So money has gone through these rather opaque countries where rich people look after their money.
Football being football, Kieran, a lot of people who aren't Chelsea fans are disappointed that there's no sporting sanction, no points deduction. It's interesting, in a very detailed statement from the Premier League, they outlined every single trophy and league position that Chelsea won and where they finished in that period, which you would think they would do if they were going to give them a sporting sanction. I wonder why they gave us that information. Unless they were going to say, well, this is why they're having points deducted because other clubs would have maybe reached the Champions League place or won the FA Cup at the time. But the sporting sanction not happening, I presume it's down to what the Premier League called an extraordinary level of cooperation from the current Chelsea owners?
Yeah, it seems a strange thing for the Premier League to say, because we always say, that's the what, what's the why? Why did Clearlake Capital report themselves? It could be that their auditors may have spotted these things, but again, auditors wouldn't be going back to look at the acquisition of another company. Remember, Clearlake have benefited themselves whilst the football club's been fined £10 million by the Premier League and 8.6 by UEFA. Clearlake Capital have saved themselves £150 million in terms of the asking price. So the reason why there's not been given any sporting sanction is that the sanctioning body, and there was 3 people on it, and they've seen over 200,000 pieces of evidence, by the way. So, and God knows that means how many pieces of evidence there'll be for the Manchester City case, which is even bigger than this. They've seen the evidence, and then they've got their calculators out, because I'd imagine if I was an Everton fan, or if I was a Nottingham Forest fan, or indeed if I was a Leicester City fan, all of those clubs have suffered points deductions for breaching what ultimately is some rather arbitrary rules in terms of allowable limits under PSR. Well, the Premier League said, we've looked at the impact on the accounts for every season where these transactions are undertaken, and we have recalculated Chelsea's PSR. And in each occasion, Chelsea's losses went up, but they didn't go through the £105 million limit. And they say that, well, the reason why Forest and Leicester and Everton were sanctioned on field in terms of a points deduction is that is the issue which triggers a points deduction. And I appreciate you've got to judge every case on its merits, but these are very, very inappropriate payments in terms of the governance of Chelsea Football Club. They are payments to unlicensed agents. Somebody knows the difference between a licensed agent and an unlicensed agent. So this has been a deliberate attempt to conceal evidence to the football authorities. And we don't know what the FA's sanctions are going to be. So it could be that the Premier League are aware that the FA are going to impose a points deduction on Chelsea. I personally think that's very, very unlikely. The FA is not known for taking leadership on items, and again, you would expect a coordinated announcement from both the Premier League and the FA if that was to be the case. But we don't know, and there's an awful lot of really weird stuff, because the judges signed off on this case on the 26th of November. We're now on the 16th of March. That's when it was signed off by Chelsea and the Premier League. So why is it that it's taken 4 or 5 months almost to 4 months to find the ability to say, yes, you've been asked to give evidence, you have self-reported. Again, these delays just seem to make no sense.
My list of questions gets bigger with every explanation you give me, Kieran. There are 2 particular ones I want to come on to, but just on the PSR issue, because it's a strange press release from the Premier League. It's almost like we do this with a heavy heart. We wish to make this clear. This is the old Chelsea we're punishing here. New Chelsea couldn't be nicer people, but unfortunately they've been caught up in this thing. But the Premier League seem to also bend over backwards to answer the question I'm going to ask you, which is, if these payments, these £47 million payments, were done properly, if they were registered, if they were paid over the table rather than under it, would that have affected Chelsea's PSR situation in any of those seasons? In other words, would they have gone over the limit of money they're allowed to lose?
No. The Premier League says we've done the sums, and in our opinion, Chelsea in none of those years would have been over the £105 million limit, and as a consequence of that, we don't feel that they should have a sporting sanction. And I would imagine there could be a club about 150, 180 miles north and a bit west of Chelsea who are going, well, we've been accused of payments off book and so on. What are the implications for us? Although at the same time, that club has not necessarily cooperated to the same degree as Chelsea have with the Premier League.
Well, spoiler alert, Kieran, that's going to be my very last question in about 7 minutes' time, I would say. Two very important questions, I think, Kieran, that are at the heart of this. We're talking about 48 million pounds of unauthorised payments, which is broken down roughly £23 million to 7 different agents, and then £24 million to, and I quote here, other individuals and corporate entities. Now, the agents, I understand, who might the other individuals and corporate entities be who are getting £24 million from Chelsea off the record, so to speak?
Well, some of those people are former employees of Chelsea. Again, some names have been redacted, and yet Frank Arneson's name has been put into the report. Now, this is where it appears that the people were being paid, but they weren't going through the books of Chelsea FC. So you're getting your salary, and again, the individual has done nothing wrong. Yeah, they check, I've got my pay slip this month, I'm happy. But that doesn't seem to have come out of Chelsea's bank account. It's come out of the account of somewhere else. And you keep asking yourself a question, well, if you were under the PSR limit and it was an employee being paid off book, why do this? I cannot see any benefit to the club. And the other payments did include transfer fees. So it looks like sometimes agents will set up companies, offshore companies, through which they will funnel money. So these will be those other entities that they were referring to.
I think the most important question, Kieran, and I think it was important to establish a bit of context and detail before asking this question, is these things don't happen in a vacuum. These things are not one maverick payroll officer making a mistake with a keyboard or just putting some money through to a mate. Somebody at Chelsea, across the years, during the reign of Roman Abramovich, is signing these payments off. Surely, there must be. So, although it's not going through the books legally, it's going through some sort of process. Do we know if that's the case? It must be the case.
It must be the case. Now, I refer to the judgment. It says it was done with the knowledge and approval of senior directors and executives of Chelsea Football Club. And then it says, who are no longer there. So it's no longer there. But if they had approved these transactions, why are there not separate cases against individuals who were working for Chelsea? Because surely those people should never work in football again if they've been approving such payments. And then we come to something very, very odd. If you take a look at the accounts of Chelsea FC PLC for the year ended the 30th of June 2022, this was a year after the acquisition by Clearlake Capital. It says, and as part of the acquisition, Blueco, which is Clearlake's company, Todd Bowley's company, paid executives £49.75 million, effectively as redundancy payments. And this appears to have gone to 2 individuals. One individual got a payment of £35 million. Now, I'm not saying that the people who got these payoffs were the people who were approving these transactions. But at the same time, it has to have been somebody very senior. You can't make a transfer payment of £19 million, surely, unless somebody very senior at the football club has signed off on it. So it just makes you feel very, very muddled and very, very confused. On the one hand, we've got Clearlake Capital saying, we've done the honourable thing. We've investigated Chelsea's accounts, as part of our due diligence, looking at the background of the club and so on, and we found these unusual payments. And at the same time, Clear Lake Capital was saying, oh, by the way, we've just paid 49.75 million to executives who presumably must have been aware of these payments. If they weren't, how on earth does Chelsea have any... How on earth do the auditors sign off the accounts? Because you've got multi-million pound payments being made to individuals on the back of these transactions. So it just doesn't add up.
When the Premier League say employees at a senior level no longer at the club, is the implication there that they are beyond the Premier League's control now, i.e. they're safely back in Russia? Is that what they're trying to imply, do you think?
Not necessarily in Russia, I would say.
Okay.
Roman Abramovich, he doesn't live in Russia,
Right.
is my understanding. They might not be working in football at present, but whoever signed off on these shouldn't be allowed to work in football again for a significant period of time, surely, because their integrity and their bypassing of the government of the governance structures at Chelsea Football Club is at the very, very least worth of further investigation.
I know this sounds like an idiot question, but in a way, Kieran, that's my job. That's what I'm here to ask. Does this money have to be paid back? Does it come off the money that will eventually be going to the people of Ukraine that we're told, the money that's been frozen? Does this money even exist anymore, if you see what I mean?
Well, this money has been banked by the unlicensed agents and the other football clubs to whom Chelsea has paid money for transfers. So that money cannot be recovered. I think there's a broader issue with regards to the statement which was put out by Roman Abramovich along the lines of the sale proceeds will be passed across to the victims of Ukraine. I think Martin Ziegler published something in the Times about 10 days ago where he says, could it now be, and this could be the case, that what Roman Abramovich is going to do is that from the sale proceeds, which were, first of all, they're no longer £2.5 billion because it's now down to 2.35 because of the £150 million knocked off by Clearlake, is Roman Abramovich now going to subtract his loans to Chelsea Football Club, which was around about 1.6 million. So now we're down to around £700 million. That's going to the victims of the conflict in Ukraine. And then it sort of all appears to swirl around, how do you define the victims of the conflict in Ukraine? Vladimir Putin might say that he's a victim, for example. And in the world of football, awarding people prizes and money when perhaps you wouldn't directly associate them with an event does now appear to be quite normal course of behaviour.
Well, especially for the winner of FIFA's Peace Prize, they timed that badly, didn't they? Before we ask, obviously the big question is going to be about Man City and how this affects the Man City charges, if it does. But before that, the other charge, a fine of £750,000 for Chelsea, also banned for 9 months from registering academy players if they've been registered with another club previously. Chelsea have already got enough players in their academy, enough quality players in their academy to not worry about that. But what was this a punishment for?
Well, this was reported by a third party, by all accounts, and it again it looks like Chelsea have agreed that the very fact that they don't seem to be appealing this. We could speak for hours upon the grotesque behaviour of football clubs towards children, who they see as dollar signs on the hoof to be caught in the butterfly nets of voracious clubs. Chelsea are not the only club that have made inappropriate approaches in the terms of trying to persuade young people and often their parents to switch clubs, and this is an ongoing issue within football. I think we mentioned to such an extent that some academies now, when they're having kids playing football, have gone to somewhat crazy step, but understandable, of children wearing football kit in academy matches and not having numbers on the backs of the shirt to make it more difficult for predatory eyes to identify who player X is going to be. It's no longer the number 7. It's that slightly taller lad with the slightly darker hair, and it becomes that much more difficult. But what an indictment of the industry that this now has to take place.
I like the butterfly net of other clubs. When you get all Morrissey on us, that's fantastic. You mentioned appeal then. Does that indicate that they may be allowed to appeal the main charges? You said they're not appealing the academy charge, but is there the right of appeal for this?
It's been signed off. It's been signed off by Todd Bowley on the 15th of March. So on the basis of that, I don't think that there can be an appeal. And this isn't a charge as such. It is this somewhat strange sort of sanction agreement. So because Chelsea themselves reported the offence, they can hardly appeal that they've been found guilty of that, because they said we're guilty of it.
And Chelsea fans, quite rightly, we've talked before how defensive fans get about their clubs being under attack. Quite rightly so. We would both do it if we were our clubs. They will quite rightly point out that the new owners did report themselves. The new owners did immediately find this discrepancy and go to the Premier League and say, what's happened here, we need to take responsibility for this. So fair play to them for that, surely.
Yes, I think there's an element of self-interest in that as well, is that it further justifies the £150 million deduction in the fee, and they've ended up with a £10 million fine from the Premier League, an £8 million fine from UEFA, and we await to see what's going to happen from the Football Association. Now, whether this will result in Chelsea paying the net amount up. So let's say that the FA gives another 10 million, and say, well, in total it's 30 million. We've knocked off 150, so now we're going to pay 120. Or whether we just say, oh well, yeah, that's a contract. We're not privy to the small print.
I'll let the record show that it was me who tried to be fair to Chelsea there. So any tweets should be directed to you, basically. And I like the fact you tried to say 150 million, but subconsciously you're so full of Man City, you said 115, because it's the one figure we've all got floating around in our heads at the moment. And I have to ask you what this means for the Man City. I mean, if you think about, this compared to the Man City case, this one is much more simple. The Premier League, you tell us, have been sitting on this since November. I mean, what on earth does that mean for the timescale of the Man City case? And also, what does this punishment tell us about what might be coming down the line for Man City? Because they sure as hell didn't self-report, did they? No. And remember, the fine was halved. And here I'm going to give Chelsea credit because of the very fact that they did self-report. That clearly has not been the case. And I think I've said from day one that if you take a look at the three types of charges against Manchester City, we've got the allegations of disguising money from the owners as sponsorship money. That's fraud, if proven. Not fraud from a legal point of view, fraud from breaking football's governance rules. Paying people off book, well, it looks like Chelsea have done that. So that might have been the case. So that, one of the allegations, and the one which is very much in the public domain, is the allegation that Roberto Mancini was being paid £2 million a year by Manchester City and £2 million a year for doing some work in Abu Dhabi. Now, on the basis of the Chelsea outcome, £2 million is probably not going to push Manchester City over the PSR limit. So therefore, I think we've now perhaps got a precedent that for that particular charge, if found guilty, then there should be a fine for that. The allegations that Manchester City have not cooperated with the Premier League investigation, well, they haven't. There's no doubt about that. Again, no sporting benefit from doing that. So I think you've got to have a fine there. So I think it reduces the scope upon those areas of the allegations against Manchester City, which, if proven, and habeas corpus, I'm a big believer in innocent until proven otherwise, then the main areas I would suspect would have to be whether the payments have been made
from the owners disguised as sponsorship payment, and B, whether those payments would have taken Manchester City's PSR position over the limit. And we could be left with this crazy situation where Manchester City are found guilty, but they're not in breach of the PSR rules, and therefore a legal case, which has probably cost in excess of £100 million, is going to result in a series of fines.
Excuse me, the trouble with habeas corpus, Kieran, is when King John and those barons back in 1215 were discussing the whole idea of the Magna Carta and incorporating habeas corpus into English law. It probably didn't occur to him that some poor little sod of a poacher would be charged with stealing 115 rabbits. Yes. At the very most, they thought maybe 2-3. 115, that's going to take ages to get through ye olde court, isn't it? If this is the first time you've listened to the Price of Football podcast, then thank you very much. You can hear us every Tuesday with our questions pod and every Thursday with our news pod. I'm sure that on Thursday's episode there will be more catching up to do with the Chelsea situation. In fact, they won't, because we're about to record it now, so I'm going off to Larnaca. Yes. So I can take maybe next Thursday. So this is one of the reasons we did the special. Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and thank you, Kieran, for that very enlightening illustration of what's been happening at Chelsea. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.